All right, big welcome. I see so many friendly faces here. Oh, Chelsea, Catherine, Cindy, um, Chandra, my good friend Caroline, Adam, Alan. Thank you all so much for joining. Austin and I were just chatting about how it's tough to pull these off during the summertime, but I love the fact that so many people are investing on these critical topics, even in the midst of summer. So I want to just say a huge, huge warm welcome to Austin Belchak, who's joining me from Cultivated Culture to kick off this session. Please, please, please give him a huge round of applause in the chat. Maybe send emojis his way or go to ChatGPT and generate a sonnet in his honor. Austin is about to be a father for the second time. And so he made time right in the lead up to all that for everyone. So please give him a lot of love. Welcome, Austin.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. And thanks to everybody on the call. Like you said, it's summer. There's a lot of other stuff you could be doing with your day, but you decided to spend it with us. So I'm grateful for that. And we're going to do our best to pack as much value in here as we can. And the other thing I'll say is I really like watching the chats through these things. So as Jeremy and I are talking, if you have questions or feedback or thoughts, just pop them in the chat and I'll have it open and we can directly address those as we go through everything here to make sure that all the information is timely. And then I assume Jeremy will have time for questions at the end.
Absolutely. And I'll just say, Austin is an amazing educator. I used to be a kindergarten teacher of all things. Like, we believe the best way to learn is to get our hands dirty. And so we want you to pull up, LinkedIn, ChatGPT, whatever tools you want to use today, get some real valuable progress on the things that are important to you. And with that being said, let's just sort of speak to the big headlines here. And we're still seeing this because these headlines were in the last 2 weeks alone. Google's still laying off people, Microsoft laying off more people. And we get it. We've been inside those organizations. So we know what it's like when there's all this churn. That being said, we believe that by really understanding how the hiring process works, from the organizations, from the recruiters, from the hiring manager, from the algorithms, you can beat even the toughest times and stand out. And to help you get there, we're going to ask 3 things in return. First of all, we're going to ask for you, as Austin said, to come to that chat time and again, to answer pop quizzes, to share questions, to share ideas. Number 2, we would love for you to really dig in. So pull open that separate screen and get ready to take action in real time. And then third and finally, because we always love to give some things away, anyone who volunteers for any of the live role plays we do today will win a brand new copy of my new ChatGPT book. So with that little incentive on the line, let's start off with the first pop quiz. If you had to guess how many resumes the average recruiter is juggling at Microsoft or Google or pretty much any top employer in the world, what's your best guess? Is it 100, 1,000, or a whopping 10,000 resumes? I can see a lot of folks have thought about this quite a bit. And Margarita is saying C, Margaret's saying C, Sabina's saying C, Haley's saying C. And to my everlasting sorrow, as a former recruiter at Teach for America, you are absolutely right. If you look at the data, the world's largest HR organization says the average recruiter is juggling 30 to 40 open job recs, probably even more during tougher times. And on top of that, every single job rec attracts 250 resumes. So do the math and understand that resumes are basically pouring in and bearing our poor recruiter. So what's a job seeker to do? Well, I think the first critical step is you've got to understand your audience. Just like a marketer understands their customers or a teacher understands their students, you've got to understand who you're trying to serve, and that takes X-ray vision. So what I'd love to start with, Austin, is to learn a little bit about what you learned on the inside at Microsoft and other organizations in terms of how hiring actually works. What did you discover and what mostly surprised you from that experience?
Yeah, for sure, Jeremy. So I think there's a couple of things that really stand out that I think most folks don't understand when we're going through, a job search or thinking about a career transition, especially for a company like, that's at the caliber of the ones that you were talking about. So the first piece here is that, to your point, these recruiters are juggling tons of resumes. I think the most recent data that I saw was that Google was getting, as of a couple of years ago, 50,000 resumes a week. And I imagine that figure is similar for Meta, for Microsoft, for any of these top tier companies. And so when we think about that, that graphic that you shared, we share that one a lot in our webinars too, where it's the 250 resumes and then 5 or so people get the interview and 1 gets the offer. That's an average, right? So when we think about average, that includes everybody from Google all the way down to, the shop around the corner from me. So once we get higher up in that company caliber, those F500s, those F100s, et cetera, there are many, many more resumes coming in through the online portal. And so there's a couple of things going on with that. The first is, when there's that sort of volume, it's really, really hard for you to differentiate yourself, especially when the medium is so constrained, right? We're only allowed to use a resume, a cover letter, and that's really about it. Maybe there's a couple open-ended questions. So the medium is really constrained in terms of how we can stand out. But on top of that, we also have to think about putting ourselves in the recruiter's shoes, right? You mentioned your experience with this. When you're juggling 10,000 resumes, I think a lot of people have this dream that, oh, the recruiter is going to sit down and read my resume from top to bottom and spend even 5 minutes on it. But 5 times 10,000 is 50,000. That's a lot of minutes, right? That recruiters simply just don't have time to work through. So there are these other processes that they use to sift through resumes. But frankly, knowing those doesn't even really help us, because the numbers are just not in our favor. So what we need to understand then is where the actual applicants who are getting hired are coming from. And when we're talking about these types of companies, the answer is referrals. I don't know about your experience, but at Microsoft, the vast majority of people that we interviewed for our team, that we brought in for our roles, they came through some sort of referral, whether it was somebody on our team, somebody else at the company. There was that trusted advisor who was going to the hiring manager and saying, hey, you would be stupid to not interview this person because they have X, Y, and Z experience. And when that's what we're comparing, and this is the exact infographic that we speak to as well. If you go up, I don't know if you had these prepared, Jeremy, but I know this one cold off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Right here, you can see employee referral is 40%. And that's frankly on the lower end of the data that we've seen. But the interesting thing to me is what's on the other side of in the second column is that only 7% of applicants are coming in through that source. So LinkedIn did a survey and they basically found that 75% of people are using online applications as their primary method to job search. And that's not surprising. But essentially what that means is that when you look at this graph and you look at the data you showed before, 75% of your competition is playing in this sandbox, this space where you have less than a 2% chance of getting in the door, probably even lower when we're talking about Google, Microsoft, et cetera. Whereas when you go the referral route, you're competing with 7-ish% of the population, your competition, for a 40% chance of getting hired. So this was the data. This infographic right here was actually the one that I saw when I was job searching that completely changed the way that I approach things. And that held true as I continued to get the job at Microsoft and start to hire people there and work through everything. So I would say the number one piece of advice that anybody can take away from this is that you want to be optimizing for referrals rather than showing up on a job board every day, applying for jobs online, doing all of that. You want to spend a little bit of time doing that, maybe 10, 20%, but 80% of your time should be focused on finding people who can influence your ability to get hired, getting out there, building relationships with them, and turning them into advocates who are going to sing your praises to the hiring manager. And that's really what's going to help you get in the door.
I love that.
So that's one of many things that I learned, but I think that was a lot of information. And I also want to make sure that we answer any questions and that's resonating with everybody. So I'll pause there, but we can keep on bulldozing if you want.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about how to get a referral in the next minute or two. But before we go there, just to answer Shukut's question here, what software or tool, Austin, are recruiters using to make a short list of resumes? So if you have 10,000 resumes to get through, how do recruiters get through them efficiently?
So Jeremy, I think you'd probably be more qualified to answer this than I would be. My experience isn't in recruitment and HR. My whole company is based on me being a job seeker and seeing a lot of frustration with these same processes that I imagine everybody in the audience is frustrated with. And so everything that I teach people, everything that's in our system is essentially, a reverse engineering of the process from the job seeker side. Now, naturally, over the last 7 years of building my business, I've gotten some insight into this. But again, I think you would be the expert. So you pulled it up here, and it's basically those applicant tracking systems. Now, applicant tracking systems, they are quite quite a controversial thing. And they're also sort of a mystic thing. Like people don't really understand what goes on behind the scenes, like how the sausage is made. And so I think the best way to describe them, and you can tell me if you agree or if you want to edit anything I say, that's totally fine. But applicant tracking systems are essentially pieces of software that make it easier for recruiters to filter through and parse candidates based on certain criteria. So based on experience, qualifications, based on other things that might show up. And it also makes it easier for them to manage people through the hiring process. So I think a big myth with ATS systems is that they automatically reject candidates and they filter stuff out and they're robots that do all this. And who knows with ChatGPT and where we're headed, maybe that's down the road, but that hasn't really been the case so far. Most of these ATS systems, there's a human behind the scenes using the tool, but it's still a tool. And the problem with these types of things is that, let's say you're like myself, I transitioned from healthcare into tech. My resume was full of healthcare stuff. So if a recruiter is looking for somebody with experience with a specific hard skill in tech or experience in tech, that just wasn't on my resume. And so I'm not going to show up in their filters, and that's going to leave me sort of in the ether, in the black hole. And that's what I think is frustrating to a lot of people, because even if you are a traditional candidate and you have the experience, if your resume isn't optimized the correct way, there is the chance that it kind of gets lost in the shuffle here. So this is the tool that most companies are using to sift through these applicants. But how'd I do? Is that on base or anything you want to add there?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And in fact, someone even asked right here, this was John, I want to get a referral, but what about the time spent generating that referral versus the job actually being open?
Yeah.
And so I think rather than go down that ATS rabbit hole, let's just focus on the fact that referrals don't have to be hard. They don't have to be time intensive. They don't have to be scary, frankly.
Yeah.
And let's just speak directly to that. And, I was going to do a little pop quiz next in terms of, who recruiters tend to prefer, but we've already covered the data. So let's just dive right into it. If we know that referrals are the sort of path to success, how do you actually get a referral, Austin?
100%. So we have a specific system for this, but John, to the point of your question here, when we look at the average job search, so a DIY job seeker doing everything themselves, when they're going through the job search, the data from third-party companies who are running surveys and tracking this stuff, the data is that the average job search lasts anywhere between 6 to 8 months.
Wow. So
on our side, the coaching clients that we take on, we solely focus on networking and referrals. We still help people with applications for a part of the process, but the magic in our system is totally based on referrals, and that's where we spend 80% of our time with our clients. Our time to offer is 104 days. So it's a little less than half of what you're seeing in the average job search. Why does that happen? Well, when you apply for jobs online, we get that instant gratification that we're all looking for in today's world, right? I go to LinkedIn, I press easy apply, or maybe I put a little bit more thought into it. I apply, I get the confirmation email, and I can go home to my wife, to my kids, to whoever else, and I can say, hey, I applied to 10 jobs today, or I applied to 50 jobs today. And that feels good. I go to sleep that night and I feel good knowing that I did that, I took that action. But what ends up happening is when we go back to the numbers that Jeremy shared earlier, when the chances of getting in the door are so slim, right? Less than a 2% chance of getting in the door when you apply for a job online. So I feel good tonight and I feel good tomorrow, but then a week from now, when I haven't really gotten any results, I kind of wonder what's going on. And then a month from now, I get frustrated. And then 3 months from now, I'm fed up and I don't know what to do. And I'm still only halfway to the finish line as an average DIY job seeker. So the problem with the online application process is that not only are your odds really, really low, but the chances of you like getting in the door, it's just very, very frustrating, right? You get no feedback. Like none of the recruiters, none of the employers are saying, hey, John, thanks so much for your application. Here's a point-by-point list of what you need to do in order to get an interview next time. Like, you don't hear anything back. So there's no way that you can optimize. So that's kind of the trap here is mentally, it seems easier and faster to do the online application process, but in reality, the referrals are actually going to be a faster route in the door. Now, does that mean that you should never apply online? And I think, John, you just asked this question. Our recommendation is that if the job is open, apply, go do that. Like there are plenty of tools out there. We have a tool called resumatch.io. It's RESY match.io. That will basically, and Jeremy, you can run a sample scan if you want. You may have to log in, so no worries on that front. But basically, this will compare your resume to the job description and give you a match score and tell you what you need to adjust. So this way, you're updating your resume and optimizing it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, instead of 30 minutes, an hour plus. And I'd be curious to know in the chat, like, how long do you all spend updating your resume on average? Like, how much time would it take you to update your resume for a new role that you're applying to? And my guess would be it's either on the very short end, because we've gotten so fed up with the online apps that we're not doing much personalization at all, or it's way too long because we're doing way too much personalization. So our goal here, to Jeremy's point, I got you again with the lead capture here, but this will tell you exactly what you need to know. So go do this, submit your resume, apply for the job, and then dump everything else into the referral side of things. So then how do we get a referral? So essentially the way that our system works, the foundational piece here.
Do you mind if I stop you, Austin? I think sometimes that like seeing is actually even more powerful than just hearing. What if we did this as a live role play? Like, what if we took someone from the audience and say, hey, let's work with Austin on how you would crack Microsoft or Google or any of those places. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it.
Yeah. And again, I know this is a little gutsy, putting yourself out there, but if anyone is willing to raise their hand right now, just put your hand up on Zoom and you will get a free copy of this book. And Amy, I definitely
Amy wasted no time.
Yeah, Amy, it would be amazing on Jeopardy. Amy, I'm going to give you the ability to turn on your mic. Hold on one second. There you go, Amy. Feel free to turn on your mic if you like your webcam and come join Austin and myself. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, Austin. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for volunteering, Amy. You made our day.
I am going to be an embarrassment for you. I'm sorry, but I'm going to try really hard.
Oh,
I'm really enthusiastic about this opportunity, but I am in a career change mode. So I want to do you have 30 seconds for me to give you a spiel as to
tell us about yourself.
My position is? Okay. So I have been out of the job market specifically for about 20 years, homeschooling my kids. It was a planned absence. And in the interim, I've tried to stay kind of professionally busy with a lot of volunteer work, like as a director for a credit union, and also as executive director of a homeschool cooperative that we built from the ground up to serve like 120 families. So I have some experience doing some stuff. I've maintained basically project management roles kind of things. And my master's is in management. Okay. So I'm like shooting in the dark with just skill sets that I've identified through my resume. Should I start by sending you that?
Well, how about this? I'm going to actually let you work directly with Austin here, and I'll just illustrate on my screen. What do you want to know about Amy in terms of guiding her search for a referral in particular, Austin?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, for sure, Amy. So I would say that the first place to start is, do you have an idea of the job titles that you might be targeting?
Some, but I don't know that I even know that. I know that sounds really ignorant, but
that's fine.
I've been out of the job market for about 20 years. Was recently contacted by a recruiter who suggested an avenue that I would have never considered, but she obviously picked me through my brand or whatever on LinkedIn, which is not robust, and found me suitable for a title I would have never considered with a publishing organization called an acquisitions editor. So I guess with that, I mean, I'm having trouble limiting myself.
For sure. So I would say, and Jeremy, you can tell us which direction you want to head in here. The first step in the job search is to get clarity on where you want to go.
Yes.
And I think that's super important, because let's say you're considering 2 different job titles, 2 different industries. And obviously right now you're probably considering many more, given, how much things have changed and how much there is to explore. And I don't mean to say this to scare you, because it's not to say that we have to get to one before you could do anything here. But when we have more than one path that we're considering, the most of our time and attention that we can give to either path is 50%. I mean, you could skew it one way or the other, but if you're doing that, then the percentage drops for the other path. And I say that to say there are other people who have chosen one of those paths, and that's their commitment. So they have already decided that they want to get into publishing in that job title, and that's their goal, and that's their focus. it's going to be really hard for us to beat out people who have already committed 100% to these paths that they want to go on when we're only able to give this 50% or whatever it is. And in order to win in the job search, it's really about creating a value proposition that's aligned to the companies that you want to get into. Because at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people think that companies hire the person with the best resume or the best cover letter or the most experience or the best degree. And none of that actually matters. At the end of the day, companies hire the person that they trust to bring the most value to the role. That's it. Those other things that I mentioned are just familiar ways that they use to gauge that. And frankly, they're not even the best ways to do that. So with that in mind, your goal and everybody's goal in this call as a job seeker is to come up with a pitch that focuses on the company's needs as it relates to the roles we want. Now, if we have multiple job titles that we're considering, all of a sudden we need multiple resumes. We need multiple narratives. We need multiple examples. We need multiple pitches. And we also only have one LinkedIn profile that we can optimize. It's not even like we can have different versions of that. So what ends up happening is it's just exhausting. You're trying to be 3 different versions of yourself instead of saying, hey, I want to go down this path. This is my goal. Let me put 100% into that. And then the compound interest starts building because every conversation you have gives you more information about this industry. Every project you start gives you more experience and information. Every interview you go on allows you to refine your narratives and your examples for this industry. And so what I would say here is we can talk a little bit more about how to get clarity on that path. Or we can talk about the referral piece, but I think, in your case, I think the more helpful thing would be talking about the clarity, and then the referrals, Jeremy, we could talk about later on. But I want to make sure that we're also, Jeremy, staying to the agenda. So I will let you guys decide on where we go, and I'm happy to go in either direction.
Yeah. Let's put it to the audience. You know, if there are a lot of people out there who are at the very first stage of career exploration, let us know. Go to the chat right now and say more exploration. Or if you're like, hey,
how about this?
Yeah, go for it, Amy.
How about what if we pursue it from the perspective of the acquisitions editor role?
Okay.
And let's say that's the deep dive I want to take. Is that helpful to your audience or no?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, awesome. So basically, here's what we're going to do. We have that acquisitions editor role, and that's what we want to target. So the first thing that I would do here is I would have you build out a list of 15 target companies. Now, we don't have to do this live on the call. We'll skip to the next step. But going back to crafting those unique value propositions, what we want to do is have a scope that's wide enough to increase our surface area for success, but also narrow enough so that we can go really deep on these companies. And so I would do a lot of research on these companies. I would basically I would listen to their earnings calls. I would go look up keynotes and interviews with their executives. I would go research their customer reviews, watch product demos. If it's in the publishing space, maybe I go look at some of the books that they have published, see what's been successful, see what hasn't, see what the reviews on those books look like, see if they've been in the news. I'm doing all this stuff. And my goal is to understand, and this is great right here. My goal is to understand a list of their biggest challenges, their biggest initiatives over the next 3 to 6 months, and the biggest goals that they have. Once I have that, what I'm going to do is pick a couple of those companies. I'm going to build out a contact list. So in this case, we can use, I don't know, Jeremy, if you want to scroll up to the top there. Amy, did any of these companies, did any of those stand out to you?
So I've done the first 2 steps there that you've mentioned for about 3 companies. And
okay. Do you mind sharing one of their names?
Oh, not at all. How about Wiley?
Ooh,
perfect. I see it number 9 on the list. So Jeremy, what we're going to do is go to LinkedIn.
Or should I go to the one that I really want?
Yeah, let's go big, Amy.
Yeah, why not?
All right. Well, Kendall Hunt.
Kendall Hunt. Okay. And so, Austin, should we come over here to LinkedIn and look up Kendall Hunt?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully I'm spelling it Kendall Hunt Publishing. There we go. Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay,
so you can click on the company, and then I would click on the employees, the 282 employees. All right, awesome. And so now what we can do is search for the job title here. So that would be acquisitions editor, right? So I even see June Gibbons there is an option, but we can search for the job title and just put in,
Let's see.
Or even just acquisitions. Jeremy, we're vibing today. We're right on.
I know. I got that mind meld. And by the way, I'm putting this link into the chat because I want to do 2 things. Number one, I want you to be able to replicate this on your side And if you want to do this with your own company, search for Google, search for Microsoft. You can do the exact same technique, but do it now so you burn it into your muscle memory. And it's not like, what was that thing that Austin did again? So try it right now for everyone. But yeah, keep going, Austin.
Yeah, for sure. So what we're going to do is open up a couple of these profiles here. So what I would say is we can open up June in a new tab. Maybe we'll open up Nick and Ross, and we'll just kind of scroll through their profiles here and see. But what we want to do with these people is we want to create what we call an engagement plan. So
Can
most
I
people,
interrupt?
absolutely.
I'm sorry. Can we really
course.
personalize it? There's a lady who lives near me.
Which one?
Is that rude? Sorry.
No,
I
it's
didn't
great.
mean to be. Let's see. Her name is Virgelia Jade Banks.
Oh, and she
And-
works at this company?
Yes.
Hey, oh my goodness.
And so she
And I
lives.
have to just say something real quick. Amy, can
Yeah.
you please confirm for the entire audience, you were just meeting Austin for the first time. You guys haven't like planned this out, right?
No, but I'm trying to get a job.
That's right.
love
You're
it.
here. You're here to get results. Okay, keep going. Keep going. This is awesome.
All right, cool. So, basically, we have Virgilia here, and our goal is to come up with, for each of these companies, we want to have about 10 to 15 contacts. So that's our goal. And the reason is similar to the 10 to 15 companies. We're increasing our surface area for success. For each of those contacts, what we want to do is we want to build out what I call an engagement plan. And this is essentially where we learn everything we can about this person. So while I'm at this, Jeremy, maybe if you want to Google her name and see if there are any other social profiles, or if she's written anything, or if she's been featured in anything. But basically what we're looking to do here is it's always fun when you get like actors and you're like, is that you? Or
Facebook stalking. Sorry.
but basically what we're doing is we're getting as much information on this person as we possibly can. And then what we're going to do is sit down and brainstorm 5 to 10 different ways for us to get in touch with this person. So what I'm going to do is in the chat here, I'm going to put a little networking guide in that everybody can read that kind of walks through my philosophy around building relationships, as well as a couple of different options for building relationships here. So when we look at Virgelia here, if we go back to her LinkedIn profile, we can kind of scroll down and we can see, okay, so she was a professor, and then she made the transition into the publishing space. It looks like, so she has a master's in theater. She also has a bachelor's degree in journalism. So we have a little bit to work off of here. You know, right off the top of my head, Virgelia is working in the space and then the job title that you want to be in. So that's something that we can leverage. She also made a career change. She went from being a professor into an acquisitions editor role. That's something else that's interesting here. And then she also came from, you know, it sounds like she went to grad school to get a degree in theater. I mean, it sounds like she's probably interested in that. And so that's almost another career change from, hey, I'm interested in journalism. Now I'm interested in theater. Okay, now I'm a professor, and now I'm in acquisition. So it sounds like she's done a lot of exploration in her career, which is something else that we can lean into. So most people, the mistake that they make is they see somebody like this and they send them a message and they say, hey, Virgelia, you work at Kendall Hunt, and I'm really excited to you know, about the roles that are there, about what the company is doing. And if you have 30 minutes, I'd love to, basically that. I'd love to pick your brain. Nobody wants their brain picked. And asking for a referral, asking people to review your resume, basically what you're doing is saying, hey, I'm a total stranger. We've never met before, but I would love for you to take 30 minutes of your valuable time and spend it on me with, you know, potentially 0% ROI. Most people aren't going to do that. And that's why that doesn't work. So we call that the me mindset. Instead, what I want you to do, and I put a networking guide in the chat for everybody to check out, but one of the things that we talk about is treating networking or treating relationships like your checking account. So if we want a referral, let's say, or if we even want advice, let's say that costs us 20 social dollars. If I try to make that withdrawal upfront in the very first message, I'm going to overdraft my account, right? And there are consequences. You get the overdraft fee. If you do too many times, your account's canceled. And, you know, those types of things are a great parallel for networking. So instead, what we need to do is we need to make some deposits. We need to put some social capital into this relationship first, until we work our way up to a place where we can comfortably make the ask. So what can we do here? What options do we have? One option is reaching out to Virgelia and saying, hey, you know, I was looking for people on LinkedIn who made the transition from academia into publishing, and your profile came up. I saw that you had this really interesting transition from, being a professor at Hampton to, and we're going to hit the limit here. So One thing I also recommend is using email over LinkedIn. Jeremy, I'm happy to get your take on this, but
Yeah,
we can talk more about that, about why I make that recommendation in a second. But we might just say like, hey, you made this transition, and I imagine that was hard to do. I'm looking to make a similar transition. I'm looking to get into publishing from a non-traditional background. Would you be up to chat about your journey and share some of the challenges you faced, right? So this is still sort of a similar ask to, can I pick your brain for 30 minutes? But we've subtly shifted the language to position them as an expert, to acknowledge, the work that they put in. So that's one option here. Another option is a strategy I love. It works so well for so many situations, and it's in that guide. It's called the advice triangle. And the advice triangle basically works where, Virgilia here has experience and information that we would potentially want. So what we can do is we can position her as an expert and turn her into a mentor. And the way that we do that is we send her a note and we say, hey, Virgilia, I was looking for people who have really awesome experience in the publishing space, maybe even in, the Virginia area. I came across your profile, and, to provide some background on myself, here's where I'm coming from. I'm looking to get into publishing, and I'm wondering if the best investment of my time would be doing A or B. So reading this book or taking this course or starting this project, getting this certification or attending this event. Pick something that you can do in 1 week, 2 weeks. The shorter, the better, but you also want it to be meaningful. And the hope is, and even at the end of the message, you can say, I know your time is valuable. You have a lot going on. I'd be so grateful if you just replied and said, do A or do B. We just want to make it as easy as possible for them to reply, because once we have that one reply, we have the hook in and we're good to go. Because then what you do is you go out there and you take action on that thing. You go do A or you go do B. And then you reply back to Virgilia and you say, hey, I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, I messaged you and you gave me this advice. I just have to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I went and did that thing, and here's what I learned. Specific thing A, specific thing B. Here's how I'm integrating that into my approach. And I'm just so grateful for all this. If you don't mind me asking again, what would the next piece of advice be? What should I do from here? And so this is kind of the second point in the triangle, where we bring it back around, because now what this person has seen is that you listened to them, you listened to what they had to say, you went and took action on it, which most people don't do. And through those things, you've illustrated that you're somebody who's worth investing in. Now they know that if they give you a piece of advice, you are more likely to go take action on it. And that's what they love to see. People love to know that their advice is being recognized and used by somebody else, right? That's just a natural thing that we humans have. So we're playing into that here. And now we started this cycle where you ask for advice, you take action on it, you report back, and you ask for more advice. And you can just keep repeating that and repeating that. And the beautiful part about this is that with each pass through the cycle, you're creating more investment from Virgilia, because she's seeing you grow and she's seeing you become better at your craft as a direct result of her advice. And so what's going to happen now is that once you've gone through a couple of cycles, you can be honest and say, hey, and not that you shouldn't be honest before, but you can say, hey, I am, here's the deal. I'm looking, I've been out of the workforce for 20 years. That doesn't mean I haven't done some amazing stuff during that time, but I am looking to jump back into, a 9-to-5 type situation. And I have my heart set on publishing. And what I've been doing, as you've seen, is working to build out my skill set. But I just wanted to say, if there's any roles that you hear about, if anything pops up that you think I might be a fit for, I'd really appreciate it if you keep me in mind. And now what happens is she already has some investment, right? And we see this time and again, right? If I have skin in some sort of game, I'm more likely to speak positively about that thing. So all of the crypto people out there, right, who invested in all the crypto, you never really heard them say bad things about crypto because they paid money to purchase some of that. Same with other stocks, same with other investments people make, right? We're just naturally prone to speak highly of things that we have invested in and that we have kind of planted a flag in. So Virgilia, at this point, will have planted a flag in your growth because she's helped you and given you advice, and you can turn that into a referral. You can turn that into somebody who's going to advocate for you. So pretty deep dive on one strategy there. The article that I shared is it has a couple more. I think there's 3 other examples in there. And then what I can do is send another podcast that has 10 different ways that we can add value to people as well. But how does that help as a starting point in terms of how we might take a different approach and maybe delaying our gratification a bit to build some social capital in this relationship in order to be more effective. How's that resonating with you?
I think that sounds great. That's kind of where I'm stumbling into now. I've had my first couple of ventures there. Once that lady contacted me, that recruiter contacted me, it started me sort of on a path. And there are a couple of podcasts that I listen to. If you don't mind, I'll put them in the notes as well, chat notes, that kind of told me about similar types of things. So I have tried networking with, well, one, it sounds like I need a LinkedIn premium membership, and two.
Oh, interesting. What do you think about that, Austin?
Why do you think you need one?
Yeah.
Because most people I can't, like I could not directly message her.
Okay.
Aha.
So Jeremy, can you scroll up to the top of this page?
Yeah, let's show those free tools.
Yeah, and then can you go to the email finder? Boom. And you can just use my name if you want.
Okay, and that's under the cultivated culture.
Exactly.
Sorry, and I'll go back, and I don't want to waste time with things
No
that
worries.
you.
No. Yeah, so you would just put in Virgilia's name, you put in the company website, and it will do all the heavy lifting for you. So you don't have to pay LinkedIn for the privilege of building a great opportunity.
Sweet, because if you have any remote connection, so I've used people from my degree, my master's degree from the same school.
Yeah.
But I totally awkwarded that because I didn't creatively network it well. It was basically just an ask, and I don't like that. I don't want to just have to ask. I want to be able to contribute to them as well. And other than saying, gosh darn it, I'll be a great employee if you refer me along. Like, sure. I haven't thought of necessarily things like that to say, but you got me creatively thinking about ways that I can make myself more compatible and massage people's desire to be useful.
I love that. Oh, Amy, I'm so glad you volunteered today. You have absolutely rocked our worlds and helped so many others learn as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amy.
Gosh, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. This is so fun. I can't wait to hear what's next.
That's awesome. And speaking of what's next, we've got a really juicy question for you, Austin. And I think that Amy will resonate with this, which is that someone asked and said, hey, this is like amazing. I think someone said, this is pure gold, in fact. But they also said, hey, I also have life, kids. I know you resonate with that, Austin. Parents, school, working for a paycheck. I really only have 1 to 3 hours per week. If I only have a limited amount of time to invest in this, where would you spend that time, Austin?
Yeah. So Robin, I see you and I feel you loud and clear on this. I kind of think the whole phrase, like we all have the same 24 hours is sort of full of it a little bit. And you're so right. We need to maximize the bang for our buck. So what I recommend is diving deeper into the networking, and really, if you want to maximize your time, the most effective thing that you can do is understand where the best angles are for you to connect and to go really deep on finding people that you can do that with. So for example, we just talked about the advice triangle, as I call it. If that's something that you feel can work for you, I would go out there and I would find people who are working at your target companies who you feel that the advice triangle is just going to really work well with. Another example of a networking tactic that we use is engaging on LinkedIn. So, I mean, if Jeremy wants to run it live, if you go to LinkedIn and you type in the search bar, just some keywords about your job title. So maybe we say something like acquisitions, if we're going to keep the same thing going here. And I don't know what will come up, but if you filter by posts, Jeremy, and then if you go to all filters.
Hey, there's Alan. Alan is on the call right now. Everyone check out Alan.
No, what's up, Alan?
All filters.
Yeah, so all filters, and then you go down to the author company. It should be all the way at the bottom, I think. Yeah, author company. Then you can plug in, the list from the ChatGPT setup that we found earlier, or whatever target companies you have. And what this is going to do is it's going to pull up a list of all the posts that include the keywords that we put in here, as well as or that are also written by people who work at those companies. And so then what we can do is we can click on their profile and see, how often does this person post? And if they post regularly, to me, that's like 3 times a week. I can bookmark their profile, and then I can just make a note to show up on it daily. And then if they have a new post, I can leave some sort of positive, supportive comment. And through that, I'm going to get noticed. People are going to notice my profile picture. They're going to notice my name. They're going to associate that with positive support around their content. And that's going to be those same small deposits that we're making in our bank account hoping to work our way up to the point where we can then make that withdrawal, ask for the referral, ask for advice, whatever it is. And the beautiful part about this is we can stack them now. So let's say that Jeremy here posts regularly and we see that and we think, all right, cool. I'm going to show up on Jeremy's profile every day. I'm going to leave supportive comments and I'm going to do that for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to send Jeremy an email and do the advice triangle. Now I've added some value in the form of the engagement, and then I'm stacking the advice triangle value on top of that. And that's just going to make it a lot easier for you to take that relationship further, take it to where it needs to get to in order to ask for that referral. So it's a beautiful thing when we stack some of these together. And it's also a beautiful thing when we have a toolbox of these different tools, because then what we can understand, Robin, getting back to what you were saying, what I like to do is I tracked all of this during my job search and with our clients. We track their success rates across all of these strategies. And for some people, LinkedIn comments work amazing. For some people, they just don't work so well, and it's not jiving for whatever reason. In either situation, we have data that's valuable, because then we know, let's double down on this, or let's avoid this and double down on something else. And so, yes, you have to do a little bit of upfront work to understand where, the 20% of your actions that are driving the 80% of your results are coming from. But once you understand that, you can be crazy efficient and effective in your job search, because you just have this system built around those 20% of actions that are driving most of your results.
Love that. Okay, I know we're down to our last about 20 minutes or so. So let's do this. Let's cover the last big topic, which I know is standing in a lot of people's way. And then we can come back and answer a million questions about referrals and anything else on your minds. So here's our final pop quiz. And that is, what percentage of interviewers make up their minds not at the end of the interview or after they're filling out the results, but within the first 5 minutes? Is it 7%, 24%, or 49%? Sheila says C, Marana says C, Joyce says C, Pam says C. The answer is indeed C. And I highlight the word admitted here because these are the ones who are upfront about it. Who knows what the actual percentage is? That being said, I think this makes sense intuitively, because if you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink, we know that we humans are not AI, we're not robots. We have this algorithm that's all about making quick instinctual decisions. And so with that in mind, what I want to close with today is not just understanding how to get into the interview room, but how to understand how to get out of the interview room with an offer in hand by understanding how your interviewers actually decide. So Austin, if you want to set this one up, what is your best advice to help people who are getting ready for that big interview absolutely seize the moment?
For sure. So I think there's 3 things that we can do here, and they all fall under the umbrella of preparation.
Yes.
In my experience, the vast majority of success that you're going to find in interviews comes from the preparation that you do. And I'm curious to know, for your last interview, everybody on the call in the chat, for your last interview, how long did you spend preparing for that interview? And we'll wait to see what comes in here. But the reason that I asked that question is because I found that, and if we could do it in hours, that would be great. Because days is like, I hope you didn't spend 48 hours preparing for your interview in 2 days. But I'm seeing a lot of 2 hours and 3 hours here. I'm seeing a couple that are a little more, maybe 4, et cetera. So if I'm being honest with everybody, that is substantially lower than what we need if we want to be really effective in interviews. For me, I mentioned the 48-hour thing. This is spread across the entire interview process at Microsoft, at Google, at Twitter. But I spent 40 hours preparing for my interviews at each of those companies, not just preparing for one of the interviews, but preparing for all of the ones in the process. But I say that to say there's a lot that you need to do. And I'm not saying you have to spend 40 hours for every company that you get an interview at. But what I am saying is that we probably need to do more than 2. I think the sweet spot is in the middle. So what do we want to do here? We want to do a couple of things. First, we want to make our answers about the company. And in order to do that, we need to research the company. So everything that I mentioned before, listening to earnings calls, looking them up on the news, reading product reviews, doing product demos, all of that, that's really what we want to do. And I think, I don't know if ChatGPT is updated to use internet data, but I know Bard and some of these other ones have that.
Right.
And so what we want to do is you could probably use AI if it's up to date, but if not, you can always do it the old fashioned way. But our goal, again, is to understand biggest challenges, biggest goals, biggest initiatives. And then we want to weave that into our answers. So going back to the reasons companies hire, they hire the person that they trust to bring the most value to the role. That's it. So when we show up and we just say what most job seekers say, which is, maybe they ask you a question, hey, Austin, tell me about a time that you ran into a challenge or overcame a challenge. Most job seekers will say, well, my last role, here was this challenge that happened and blah, 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 blah. And then they kind of cross their fingers and they hope that the hiring team can connect the dots between their answer and the hiring team's needs. So instead, we want to eliminate that step. We want to remove all doubt and we want to remove the work of the hiring team having to make that connection. So instead, when people ask you a question, what I always like to use is something that we call the in preparation technique. So what I'll say is I'll start out my answer every time by saying, in preparation for this interview, here's the research I did, here's what I learned, and here's an example of how I've helped a company do that in the past. So for example, if somebody said, hey, Austin, tell me about a time you overcame a challenge, I might say something like, well, in preparation for this interview, I went and listened to Alphabet's earnings calls. I also went and listened to, Sergey's, its keynote that he gave a couple of weeks ago. And specifically for the product that we're talking about here, let's say it's YouTube. I went and actually listened to a couple of interviews with the executive of YouTube. And through all that, as well as talking to 3 different people on the team that I was connected with before this interview, I learned that your biggest challenge is X. So let me share an example of a time where I helped an old company solve that exact same challenge, and then maybe give you a few ideas for how I think I can help you solve that challenge as well. And then you go into your answer. So what we're doing there is right up front at the beginning of our answers, we're connecting our background to what the company cares about most. We're showing them, we understand their goals, we understand their challenges, and that we have experience doing this in the past. So that's the first thing that I would do. And I would rehearse these answers until they're memorized. You don't need that first part to be memorized. You need the second part. So the example that you'd give, what I would do is I would come up with a list of the 10 most common interview questions. We could probably chat GPT that. I would sit down in a Google Doc. I would draft out my answers to each of them. Then I'd put it away, close it out, and then come back every day for the next 5 to 7 days, read each one, refine it, and rehearse it. And then the next stage would be to memorize them so that when you get an interview, you already have 5 to 10 examples ready to go in your back pocket that you can deliver confidently, no matter how stressed you are, no matter how you're feeling that day, no matter what else is going on. And then once you land that interview, you can take all the extra time that you would have normally had to use to prepare those answers. You can use that to do the company research that's going to allow you to personalize your answers. So that's the first thing that I would do. And the second thing that I would do is focus on the interviewer themselves. The same level of research that we did for the company, I would recommend that you try to do that on your interviewer as well. So if you don't know their names, you can always reach out to the recruiter. Sometimes they won't share them, in which case, we can only operate with the information that we have, but sometimes they will. And so what we're really looking to do here is find angles that we can use to potentially start this relationship off on the right foot. So an example from my background, when I was interviewing at Google, and the reason I bring this up is because when we think about the interview is a series of events. And there's a psychological principle called the serial position effect, which basically states that when we have a series of events, we as humans are more likely to remember the first event in the series and the last event in the series best. And so if I gave you a string of numbers, if I gave you 1, 7, 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, and 10, if I asked you to share 2 of those numbers with me, you'd probably say 1 and 10. And obviously that's an oversimplified example, but in the interview room, the interview is a series of events. You have small talk at the beginning, then you start off, they ask you, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to work here? What's interesting about this job? Then maybe you go into behavioral questions, maybe some case study or role specific questions. And then there's the Q&A at the end. So the cool part about that is you own the 2 bookends. You own the small talk, or you have the ability to own it if you want, and you own the questions at the end. So the small talk at the beginning can really set the stage for everything else. And that's why I recommend doing this research, because if we can find some angles to create a relationship, to create a rapport at the beginning of the interview, that's going to make the rest of the conversation a lot more fruitful. So when I was interviewing at Google, the guy I interviewed with, I did all of the research, and I found his Instagram, and I found that it was just full of pictures of ski trips. Like, this was his thing. And I grew up skiing. I love skiing. I'd been skiing a bunch of times that winter. So I'm not coming from a place of inauthenticity. I'm not kind of making stuff up. We don't want to do that. Instead, we want to find authentic angles that do align with our integrity and do align with what we're excited about or what we think we can have a conversation about. So when he asked me what I was doing that weekend, when I showed up to the interview, I mentioned that, I was hoping to go on a ski trip with my friends. And that sparked a whole conversation about where we'd been skiing and what we'd been doing that winter and what slopes we loved and mountains and resorts and all that stuff. And that lasted for the first 10 minutes of the interview. And the rest of the interview had a totally different tone than if I had not asked that question. Another example of this was a buddy of mine who he was interviewing for a role. He did the same research, and he found that the person he was interviewing with loved Star Wars. Like the person had Star Wars branded stuff on their LinkedIn. They had some posts about it. He also found this on other social channels. And he was a big Star Wars fan as well. So he brought an AirPods case that had a Baby Yoda. It was a Baby Yoda AirPods case. He brought it to the interview with him. And he just, and this is back in the days of in-person interviews being, the gold standard. But when the interview started, he put his notebook on the table and he put the AirPods case next to it. And that immediately sparked a conversation as well. So not saying that you have to necessarily go to these levels, but what I'm trying to say here is if we can maximize the small talk, if we can find ways to build a rapport with this person, the whole rest of the conversation is going to be a lot easier and a lot more personable, right? It's just going to be a different type of conversation rather than that rigid back and forth professional Q&A. So that's the second thing I would say. And then third, last but not least, is creating something that I call a value validation project. So a value validation project is essentially some sort of deliverable that you put together that identifies an opportunity or challenge for this company and walks through some potential solutions that you've brainstormed on your own. So for example, if we're talking about publisher acquisitions, in my mind, I don't know exactly what that does, but hypothesizing here, I imagine that role is responsible for going out there and finding publications that could be acquired by this company in order to, make the company money, right? So what could I do here? I could go back and I could run an analysis on their most popular acquisitions in the space that I'm targeting. And I could go find a bunch of commonalities and maybe create a framework for how they could identify those opportunities in the future. Maybe even I make a recommendation. The other thing I could do is go look at publications that or books that they put out there that didn't do so well. And I could potentially go and do some analysis on that to understand why those didn't do so well. I could even go find a book that didn't do well that I thought should have done well. And maybe there was something in the launch for that. And I could provide some options around how they could do a better launch or how they could, adjust or optimize their launch strategy. So these are just a bunch of random ideas that I'm throwing off the top of my head here. But to give you a more concrete example, we had a client of ours who was looking to get a job at Microsoft in a rotational marketing role. And so what she did, this was back pre-COVID, but what she did was she looked at all of their products and she tried to find one that needed some marketing magic, some love. And at the time, Microsoft Teams was that thing. Slack had owned all of the market. Microsoft Teams hadn't really taken off yet, but it was on most people's desktops because they downloaded it with Office. So she looked at that and she said, all right, how can we improve the adoption rates of Microsoft Teams? How can we increase their market share? And she came up with a couple of different options. So first, she surveyed a whole bunch of people who use Slack and who use Microsoft Teams. And she tried to understand, where the gap was. Like, what is Slack doing that Teams isn't doing? And the biggest thing she found was that people were confused about when to use Teams. Like, why use Teams instead of Outlook? Why use Teams instead of OneNote? Why use Teams instead of like the standalone Excel or Word? So she dug deeper into that. She did more surveys. She asked those people questions, and she came up with the idea of basically having some sort of onboarding education that made it really easy for people to understand that Teams is basically an all-in-one product that allowed you to do all of those things, but just in one place. And we could educate the customers who already had Teams on their computer, and maybe that's a natural way to get them to use it. The second thing that she did was she knew, like, hey, there are 150 million Microsoft Office users. Teams is already on their desktop. They just aren't using it because they don't know it's there. They don't see the benefit in it. So what if we could come up with a way for them to learn about Teams when it's most beneficial to them? So a couple of the ideas we had were, first, one of the most frustrating thing that I always found was when I tried to send a PowerPoint slide deck and it was too big to email. And I was like, oh my God, like, how am I going to get this to the person? Well, what if PowerPoint was smart enough to say, hey, my file size is too large to email. So let me trigger a pop-up that says, hey, I'm too big to email, but why don't you click this button to send me to this person through Teams? And so now what we're doing is we're presenting Teams at a juncture when it's beneficial for somebody to use it. And the hope is that, I send Jeremy the deck through Teams, he sees it, he messages me back on Teams, and he's like, hey, Austin, your grammar stinks and there's a typo on slides 7, 10, and 11, and then I got to go back and fix it. And I reply back in Teams. And now what are we doing? We're using Teams. So that was another idea that she had. And she had a couple more of those in the deck. But through that, she was showing clear value for the role that was not going to show through in a resume, that was not going to shine through in a cover letter, that was probably going to be hard to articulate in an interview. And what she did was, before each of the interviews she had, she would send that slide deck to people. And then when she got in the interview, the conversation was focused on those ideas. Hey, where'd you come up with these? Let's talk about this more. Like, how could we implement this? What research did you do? All of that was what the conversation was focused on. And it was focused less on, especially in the case of making a jump from, having a career gap or a non-traditional background. The conversation isn't focused on those things because you've proven out that you can do this job. And now that's the conversation. And not only is that helpful in that sense, but it's totally different than what everybody else is bringing to the table. So it's also really going to help you stand out as well. So rapid fire there, a lot of different options for everybody, but those are the three things that I would say: research, prepare your answers, try to find angles to connect with your interviewer, and create a value validation project.
I love how practical and just really clear those examples are. And what I would love to do with our final couple minutes is I want to share some goodies courtesy of Austin. And I also want to see if there are any final questions that you have. So quick check, Austin. Do you have a hard stop at the top of the hour?
I do, unfortunately.
Okay, so we're going to go into a lightning round then. So first of all, hold on to your seats. I want you to know that if you are hungry for any of the things we covered today, you can find them all at cultivatedculture.com. So not only are there all the free tools we discussed, the resume scanner, the email finder, more and more beyond that. There are courses, there's coaching. If anyone out there is feeling stuck, Austin is your man. Please, please, please do not feel stuck one day longer when you have access to those resources. And then 2, I think this is courtesy of Prime Day, but you can actually get my new ChatGPT book for free with Kindle and with Prime Reading as well. So if you want to go ahead and grab that right there in the link. Okay, Austin, maybe 2 or 3 final questions before we close up. So, question from Veronique. This is a really great strategy in terms of getting ready for these interviews, sharing this work that you've done. Would you structure it as a presentation, a blog post? How would you package up this research you've done?
Yeah, so I typically do it as a presentation, and I'm going to try to have on slide 1 a really catchy headline. So 3 ways that Microsoft Teams can take market share from Slack, for example. And then on the second slide, I'm going to try to validate the problem here. So, hey, I think, or maybe introduce the problem. Hey, this is a big opportunity that you have. This is a problem that I think you have. The next slide, slide 3, I'm trying to showcase how I know that's a problem. Here's the research I did. Here's the data that's out there. Here's me proving that this isn't just a random idea I had in the shower. And then slides 4, 5, and 6 are basically the ideas. So I think we could potentially solve it with idea number 1, and here's how to execute on that. Idea number 2 on the next slide, idea number 3 on the last slide. And then finally, slide number 7 is just going to be a little bit of a bio slide. So here's why I'm qualified to share these ideas and implement them. Here are some case studies of work that I've done in the past. Here's a link to my resume. Here's a link to my LinkedIn profile. Here's a link to any of these other things. And so that's going to allow you to package up all of that information in a slide deck that is not too long in terms of reading, but also gives you enough space to really go deep on these ideas when you get face-to-face with somebody.
Love that.
And
okay.
Jeremy, I can send you the template so you don't have to rapid fire type everything out.
Cool. And Austin will share some resources with me after the fact that we'll include in the recording. So stay tuned for that. Let's end on one last question. And that is, what if you look at some of this stuff? And this is a question from JP, a fellow awesome career coach out there. What if people say, hey, I totally get that you're getting results, but I'm also worried this is too much work? How do we find that sweet spot, Austin, between putting in the right amount of effort, but not necessarily burning ourselves out?
Yeah, so I have 3 criteria for and I assume, are we talking about value validation projects, or are we talking about everything in general?
Yeah, let's just focus on the interview stuff.
Okay. So for the interview stuff, I mean, you really should only be putting this stuff together when you have an interview. The one exception to that is preparing those answers. So drafting up those answers and then memorizing them from a core example standpoint. So if you have those 10 most common questions, tell me about a time you failed, tell me about a time you overcame a challenge, tell me about yourself, you can come up with answers in a vacuum that highlight examples from your past. And that's something that you could start doing today, because the earlier you start, the more defined and refined those answers will be. And also the longer you have to memorize them, so that one, if you get an interview, if somebody calls you up and says, hey, Jeremy, I got an interview, it's at 2 p.m. today, or it's at, it's 2 p.m. now, it's at 3 p.m. today. And you're like, you could walk into that interview and you already have memorized, crisp, confident answers to a bunch of the questions that you're going to be asked. But that's really not going to happen, right? So what's going to happen is somebody's going to say, hey, Jeremy, we got an interview for you on Friday. That's 2 days from now. Instead of starting from scratch, what I can do is I can go and I can just personalize all these answers. I can go research the company and everything. So that's the only thing I want you to do before. Everything else can happen after you get the interview. And at that point, you should be, if this is one, you should really only be interviewing at companies where you want the job. But assuming that's the case, you should be allocating most of your job search time, not all of it. You should still be job searching when you have an interview, but you should be putting your best foot forward with preparing for these interviews. And so I would say that, if you don't feel like it's worth putting more than 2 hours into the interview prep, I would question just how badly you want this role. Because for me, at least, and Jeremy, I don't know if you felt the same, but when I had the opportunity at Microsoft and I saw the salary band that they were offering and I saw the benefits and I saw what I could get out of this, I told myself that I would do everything that I possibly could to get this role, because I knew how life-changing it could be for me. And I was not going to let lack of preparation be the reason that I didn't get it. So that was the biggest thing for me. Other people could be more qualified. Other people could be, better at the job, on paper. Other people could be this, that, and the other thing. The one thing other people weren't going to be was better prepared than I was. So that was the mantra on my side. And when you have that and you're excited about the opportunity, I think you can find the time to make it work.
That's awesome. And that is a great note to end on, Austin, which is we are halfway through 2023, but because we are glass half full people, that is half a year worth of opportunity that is just out there waiting to be seized. So a massive shout out to Austin. Please give him so much love in the chat for taking an hour out of his summer to congratulate him on baby number 2. And then also a huge shout out to everyone for joining today. You brought so many great questions, so much great energy. Thank you for inspiring us as well. Here's wishing you a rest of a beautiful summer. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Jeremy.